So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Cosfic. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto was power of fist of the Sentinel after gains a student movie. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. The sun had begun to finally dip below the trees lining the horizon, dyeing the sky above it a myriad of red and orange like it had been set ablaze by the life-giving orb. This stunning scene was watched by the uninterested gaze of Kotetsu Hagane, Chunin and glorified gate guard for Konoha Gakure. The shinobi was dressed in the standard uniform for anyone his rank and higher in the military force of the village, consisting of a long-sleeved dark blue turtleneck shirt with matching trousers with the cuffs and his ankles wrapped in white bandages with a dark green flak jacket. His long, spiky black hair was held out of his face with the help of his headband, which bore a metal plate engraved with the combined spiral and leaf that was the symbol of his village. He also wore a white bandage that covered the bridge of his nose and sported a black marking over his chin much like a goatee. The tired Chunin heaved a relieved sigh as the last of a long line of visitors finally entered through the massive gates he and his partner had been guarding. Charged with seeing to the security of the village, the duo had been sitting at the small table positioned just outside of a pair of giant wooden and metal doors rumored to have been created by the Shodemi Hokage, Hashirama Senju himself, all day. "Well," he said while stretching his arms, earning a pleasant popping sound from his shoulders as he did so, "I'd say it's about time we get ready to close up for the night." At his side sat the equally bored Izumo Kamizuki, Kotetsu's best friend and teammate. This Chunin wore his headband as a bandana that covered the top of his head. A small grouping of bangs from his chocolate-brown hair hung from the front covering his right eye. Like his partner, he too was dressed in the standard uniform except that the neck of his shirt was long enough to cover his chin as well. Izumo nodded and stood, shaking his legs to get rid of the pins and needles he felt after sitting for several hours without moving. "Yeah, you get the seal on the left and I'll get the right." While the two were moving to do as discussed, they missed the sight of a new figure appearing on the path that led into the village. The sun at his back cast the figure's features in shadow and only left the shape of his body visible. Even from a distance it was obvious that he towered over them. He was a true giant who, even with the robes he wore, it was obvious that his body rippled with muscle. "Excuse me," he said, drawing the attention of the guards once he was close enough to be heard without shouting. "Would it be all right for me to enter before you close the gates?" "Do you have any identification?" Kotetsu asked while squashing the sigh that tried to escape him. The man's reply was to hold out a small book they recognized as a traveler's visa. These were commonly owned by traveling warriors, most often bounty hunters or merchants that had learned a fighting style to protect themselves on the long roads of the elemental continent. The picture in the book was of an aged man with long platinum blonde hair and a matching beard and mustache combination. His face was gentle, but it had the stern look of man who had seen many battles and come out the victor. "What's your business in Konoha, Mr. Furanji?" the Chunin asked, handing back the visa. The man took his little book and slipped it into his pocket. "I've been on the road for several weeks now," he said. "I intend to restock on my supplies and visiting an old friend before I set off for home." "May we ask who you're visiting?" "His name is Hiruzen Sarutobi," he replied with that same gentle smile. "We fought together for a time during the Third Great Shinobi World War." "You fought with Hokage-sama in the Great War?" Izumo gasped. This man must have been either incredibly strong or incredibly lucky to have survived that war. Indeed, Hiruzen-san was quite skilled in using that staff of his. The giant couldn't help but chuckle at the awed looks the two youngsters were giving him. Alas, he had things to do, so he decided to move things along. "Well, may I enter the village or do I need to find a place to sleep until morning?" Both Chunin glanced at each other uncertainly, before Kotetsu turned and waved a hand at what appeared to be a vacant street. In a burst of smoke and leaves, a shinobi clad in a skin-tight black body-suit with gray armor appeared. On his face he wore a mask with the likeness of a weasel painted on its porcelain surface to hide his identity. "If you please, Furanji-san," the masked shinobi said, "I will escort you to see Hokage-sama." "I appreciate your help," the man said, following the shinobi, who had turned to walk down the main road toward the Hokage mansion. Kotetsu and Azumo watched the hulking man keeping a steady pace with the Anbu member and couldn't help but notice the ease and grace of his step. The way he carried himself was that of a perfectly confident and capable warrior. Finally they shrugged it off and placed their hands on the gates, channeling chakra into a seal designed to make the heavy doors close with ease. Once they did so, they threaded a large wooden beam into place, locking the gate until morning. XXXXXXXXXX. They walked in a comfortable silence, the giant newcomer preferring to observe the village while the shinobi escorting him remained on guard. The man may appear to be old, but it was obvious by his body he kept himself well trained and was quite light on his feet, almost graceful. He was considering asking the man a question when a commotion originating from somewhere to the left drew his attention. The Anbu turned his gaze to the noise, his gut clenching in worry. That was the direction of the festival, which could only mean one thing: the hunt was on. "Oh, it sounds like something is going on over there," the man he knew only as Furanji commented. "Shouldn't you be investigating it?" "My duty is to escort you to see Hokage-sama, and I must not differ from that responsibility no matter how curious or concerned I may be," he answered with voice as stoic as when he first addressed the blond man. Furanji's brow furrowed. "Well, I do believe I'm feeling a little peckish," he said, starting to walk down a nearby street towards the noise. "Perhaps you could escort me to a place where I might locate some sort of food. I would like to be able to speak with my old friend without being distracted by my rumbling belly." "If it's food you require," the Anbu said as he quickly fell in step with the giant, "I know of a fine establishment that serves a delicious barbecue selection not far from here." Furanji chuckled. "I'm guessing you won't be telling me your name." "I'm afraid not. While I wear this mask my identity must be protected." The man nodded, idly stroking his beard as they walked. "Well, I have no such restrictions, and you already know my family name considering how close you were at the gate." He gave a small bow of his head and shoulders. "My name is Hayato Furanji, wandering martial artist." Weasel was about to respond, but was distracted when a sudden roar of a large mob came from a nearby alley. "Oh no," he whispered, jumping to a nearby rooftop and looking down to see a sight that would forever be burned into his memory as one of the most cruel acts that he would ever bear witness to. The mob was beating on a small boy of only 5 years of age. His bright blonde hair was matted with blood and his shirt had been ripped to shreds to reveal a torso covered in bleeding cuts and so thin his ribs were clearly outlined. All the while he cried, pleading with them to leave him alone, only to be hit even harder. The shinobi was filled with a raging bloodlust and moved to grab the handle of the tanto protruding from behind his right shoulder only to feel a strong grip settle on his wrist. He glanced over his shoulder to find Hayato standing there. The self-proclaimed martial artist's lips had curled in a vicious snarl that made even the veteran shinobi's blood run cold. "Go report this to Hiruzen," he growled as he released his hold on the young man's wrist while he stepped toward the edge of the roof. "I'll handle these brats myself." In the time it took for Weasel to blink in surprise, Hayato had vanished from the roof and reappeared in the alley below. The mammoth of a man stood over the child, one offending mobster's head clutched in his massive left hand and struggling to free himself. For the span of a breath, time seemed to freeze for Weasel as he gazed at the scene below. Hayato, half shrouded in shadow, seemed to grow even taller as he silently glared at the men and women standing before him. His thick eyebrows and slightly bowed head cast his face in darkness, but his eyes seemed to emit light, such was the power behind his gaze. Around his body, there seemed to gather an aura of blazing purple miasma that combined with his size gave him a truly terrifying appearance. "It's rather odd, isn't it?" he asked. The level, composed voice he used to address the crowd seemed much more intimidating than if he had simply yelled. "I decide to pay a visit to an old friend and I stumble upon such an act of barbarism. Would one of you fine people be willing to explain why you are all beating a defenseless child?" The crowd, once motivated by raw anger, found themselves unable to move or even speak while under the gaze of this giant. "Oh well, I guess if you have no reason, I'm going to have to punish you." In seconds bodies were flying all over as the behemoth hurled his captive like a human missile. While the unfortunate people in the projectile's way were bowled over, Hayato leaped forward and grabbed two more before tossing them like the Anbu would a shuriken. When a few shinobi tried to attack in retaliation, all he did was glare at them and they fell unconscious at his feet. In no time at all the man stood alone among a throng of sprawled bodies. The air littered with the sound of scattered pain-filled groans. Only the boy was left, huddling in a corner of the alley as the monster moved toward him. Please. Don't hurt me," he pleaded in a soft voice, so terrified it was hard to breathe. The man's aura of malice faded away instantly and he returned to being a kind old man. "It's all right," he said, kneeling next to the child and pulling a spare cloak from the bag that had somehow managed to never stray from its place on his shoulder. He wrapped the boy in it and lifted him from the ground, cradling him gently in his massive arms. "I'm here to help you." The boy drew the cloak tightly around him and huddled against Hayato's chest. They stood like that in total silence until the child fell asleep. Once sure he would not be easily stirred, the man spoke to the seemingly vacant air. "Is this how your village treats children, Hiruzen-san?" From the rooftop dropped an old man dressed in robes of white and red. Anger clearly twisted his features into a disgusted grimace. "I see you haven't lost your touch, old friend," he commented, eyeing the chaos wrought by the man in front of him. "I must thank you for saving him. I had believed he was safe in the orphanage." His hardened glare drifted once more over and his scowl deepened even further. "Apparently I was misinformed. Who is he, that he should bring such hate upon his head?" Hiruzen looked around, eyeing the surrounding buildings with a cold glare. "Not here," he replied. "We must return to my office. We will be safe from curious eyes and ears there." Hayato turned to face the Sandami Hokage, the boy still in his arms. "What of the child?" "Bring him along as well. I'll explain when we arrive." Hayato nodded and followed his friend over the rooftops and through the office window at the top of the Hokage mansion. Hiruzen took a seat at a large desk and motioned for Hayato to take one of the seats across from him. While the old man complied, the Kage placed his hand on a seal that had been carved into the wood of his desk and pulsed his chakra, causing a glowing barrier to be erected just inside the walls and sealing the room off from the outside world. "Nobody can hear us or see us with that activated," he told the old warrior still holding the boy he considered a surrogate grandson. "This will take a long time to explain, my friend. I must ask that you wait until I have finished to ask any questions." When Hayato gave his word he'd be silent, Hiruzen began to tell the man about the past 5 years. He spoke of the attack of the Kyuubi and the sacrifice made by his successor, the Yondawa Hokage, in sealing the beast into his own child, Naruto Uzumaki. This same boy was now cradled in Hayato's arms, already healed from the brutal beating he had suffered only hours before. He told the traveler of how he had lost so much of his original power to the political loopholes created by the scheming civilian council, hungry for power and never satisfied with what they have. By the time he had finished, the usually cheerful old warrior was somber as he stared at the boy he held in his large hands. "This boy has suffered much, Hiruzen," he said. "How do you plan to protect him? He'll be old enough to join the academy soon. I can have him trained to protect himself. You just told me the council is meddling in affairs they have no business with. What makes you think they haven't sunk their claws into the academy as well?" The two men sat in silence as they watched the boy slumbering peacefully. Hayato found himself wondering about his own granddaughter, Miu. How would she have turned out if she had been left in this predicament and he had not known? The old man felt an old battle lust crawl through him at the thought of what he would do if anyone dared to harm his precious little girl. That was when he felt a stroke of brilliance. "What if I took him to my dojo?" he asked, shocking his old friend. "That place where only the greatest gather?" Hiruzen inquired, a look somewhere between awed, surprised and terrified. "The same place where the residents are feared throughout the world as the fiercest warriors to ever learn martial arts. Is that the dojo you are referring to?" Hayato nodded, eyes aglow with a firm determination. "I will never allow a child to suffer like this if I have any say in it. And now I have a chance to save a child from a gruesome fate such as this one. Allow me to take him and teach him." Hiruzen frowned, deep in thought. He trusted this man with his own life and knew him to be kind and caring, if a tad bit eccentric to the point of insanity at times. The only problem was the location of the dojo itself. "It's too far," he said. "Naruto must be close to Konohagakure. This village is the home of his father and he was left the responsibility to protect it to him. If we must, I can convince them to move," Hayato countered. "They will understand when I tell them the child's story." "You can't be in the village though," Hiruzen mumbled. "It would only make things worse if it was discovered he was getting stronger. But where could you go that would be secluded enough to train the boy without being hindered?" Hayato frowned in thought as he pondered the same question, only for his old friend to once again prove his genius. "Uzashigakure." Blue's eyes snapped up to the Sandaim's face as he continued to speak. "It is far enough away from any current routes that almost no chance of being discovered exists. An entire island would provide an excellent area for various types of training, not to mention the chances you'll be able to help him discover any possible traces of his heritage that might still be there." The old master considered the facts that had been listed as well as his own knowledge regarding the former homeland of the once great Uzumaki clan. "1 week," he said while placed the boy on a couch Hiruzen had often slept on whenever he had to stay late to catch up on his paperwork. "Bring the boy to the ruins in exactly 1 week. We will meet you there." The Hokage nodded and rose from his chair to shake hands with his old ally. "I will bring some supplies to get you started. Don't worry about building anything. I have an Anbu with a very useful skill. He will be able to construct a compound for you. All that is required are the plans." "I will have one of the masters draw up designs for a new compound," Hayato answered. "Other than that, we will bring only what is necessary for our training and our clothing." The martial artist placed a hand on his old friend's shoulder. "I must go now. Remember, 1 week." Hayato jumped from the top floor and began to run. He became a blur in seconds and with a single leap he cleared the gate, running along the very path he had come toward the land that served as the home of his dojo, Tetsu no Kuni, the land of the samurai. XXXXXXXXXXX Hiruzen watched his friend until he vanished into the night, and then he released the seal and pulsed his chakra in 3 quick bursts, a silent signal to a certain squad of 4 Anbu operatives. In burst of chakra, 4 figures clad in the uniform of the Black Operations Division appeared kneeling in front of the Hokage. "Inu, Weasel, Neko, Snake," he addressed them, his kind grandfather nature replaced with that of a cold commander who had even earned the respect of the leader of Iwagakure, the Tsuchikage, for his ferocity on the battlefield. "You have 4 days to complete the mission I am about to give you. You are to tell no individuals outside of anyone I instruct you to of this mission. Is that understood?" "Hi," the 4 answered in unison, working in complete synchronization even when not in combat. "Good. Neko, you are to go to the Shinobi Library and retrieve everything they have regarding the subjects of Fuinjutsu, chakra control, stealth and trap building. Find the basic guides all the way up to master editions and bring them to me." The Anbu with long purple hair and a generous figure outlined by her skin-tight armor nodded and vanished via the Shunshin no Jutsu. "Weasel, you are to go to the marketplace. There you will buy enough provisions to feed an army. Fill at least 5 sealing scrolls to the limits of their capacity if not more. Have the bills for the provisions sent to the tower. I will handle that." Weasel nodded and disappeared via the same technique as his partner. "Inu, use your summons to track down Tenzo and tell him to report to my office immediately. After that, I want you to purchase durable clothing that will fit Naruto-kun as he grows. Like Weasel, you will send the bill to me to deal with. Snake. Every member of that mob from earlier has been detained. I am having them transported to the Torture and Interrogation Division as we speak. Find Ibiki and have him meet you there. The both of you will bring me any information on who instigated the event." Snake nodded and was about to leave, but Hiruzen had one last thing to say. "And Snake," the woman turned and saw the familiar cruel smile she had not seen on her leader's face in quite some time. "Have fun." Hidden under her mask, the Anbu's lips curled into her own sinister smile that brimmed with bloodlust. Those words were a sign Hiruzen had instructed her to always listen for. When she had first joined T&I, he had told her only one thing. There was a limit to how much pain you were allowed to inflict. The only one to lift that restriction is the Hokage himself. Have fun, was her trigger phrase. If she was ever told that, it meant only one thing. Send those bastards to hell, screaming for the Shinigami and Yami to save them from the monster they faced in their last moments. She left the office in a blaze of chakra and chaos. She was now twice as eager to meet up with Ibiki at their office. Today was certainly looking up for the young lady. XXXXXXXXXX. The scared Jonin that served as the head of T&I was sitting at his desk, drinking his evening tea, when was filled with a sudden rush of joy and began to chuckle. This chuckle rose in volume until it turned into a bellowing laugh, echoing through the halls. Every seasoned Anbu in the building felt a cold shiver run down their spine. They had rarely ever heard that laugh from their superior, and it could only mean one thing. Someone had awoken the true demon of Konohagakure and unleashed it upon the world to feast once again. XXXXXXXXXXX. Hiruzen watched as the young child of his successor slept peacefully on the sofa. His meeting with Hayato had awakened a part of the old man he had thought was long dead. Before he was known as the Shinobi no Kami, the old man was known by another equally infamous moniker, Tetsu no Sutafu, a monster on the battlefield who left pure chaos in his wake. He had been known to only kill when he had no other choice, but even then he had left legions of enemy shinobi shivering in terror at the mere mention of his name. That warrior had stirred in his slumber tonight when he saw the mob that had attacked the boy. It wasn't until he had spoken with the man he had fought side by side with during the war that he recognized that stirring for what it truly was. The man who even Danzo would admit was his superior in every way had returned to Konohagakure after a long rest, and it was time to clean house. He was interrupted from his thoughts when he felt both Weasel and Neko return, each with their scrolls in hand. The veteran of 2 wars pulled out a large scroll and unfurled it, covering his desktop with it. Next he opened a drawer and pulled out a brush and ink pot. With practiced movements he dipped the tip of the brush into the ink and began to write on the paper. With smooth, controlled strokes he crafted a series of seals before the eyes of his bodyguards. When he finished, he took the study material from Neko and sealed it into the first section marked with the kanji for shinobi. Next he took the food from Weasel and sealed them into a seal labeled with the kanji for provisions. Tenzo arrived moments later with Inu beside him. The scroll of clothes was sealed with the label of clothing. After each seal was finished, he rolled the scroll up once again and secured it with a bright red string before slipping it into the folds of his robe. "All right," he addressed his gathered subordinates. "Since you all decided to finish so quickly, I will give you the next set of instructions. I want everyone here to pack a week's worth of supplies and be ready to leave with me in 4 days. It will take an additional 3 days to reach our destination after that. Be ready to move at dawn. That is all." The Anbu departed their leader's office, bound for their respective lodgings to prepare for their newest mission. Hiruzen himself watched as the sun began to peek over the horizon. A new day was dawning, a new beginning for Naruto. A knock on the door to his office drew his attention away from his personal thoughts. Who could possibly desire an audience with him now? Curious, he called for whoever was at the door to come in and was met by the sight of his niece, Kaname Sarutobi. The girl had dark skin and dark brown hair. Her piercing blue eyes met the old man's black ones before her attention was drawn to a shifting Naruto. She eyed him curiously before addressing her relative. "Grandfather, who's that?" "That, my dear grandniece, is a dear friend of mine named Naruto Uzumaki," Hiruzen said, moving to hug the girl while guiding her over to the couch. "Just wait one moment and I'll wake him up." With small smirk, the man made a few hand signs and gathered a low amount of chakra in his mouth. The result was a small glob of water shooting from his mouth and landing square on the slumbering child's face. Naruto bolted from the couch and was halfway across the room before he realized where was. Next he registered the sound of his Gigi roaring with laughter while some random girl was giggling at his antics. "You are so going to pay for that, Gramps," he growled, wiping the water from his face while glaring at the duo. "Sorry, Naruto-kun, I just couldn't resist," The old man laughed again. "You should have seen your face." And like that he was off again, laughing until he was clutching at his sides in pain. Finally, he'd been able to pay the little hyperactive knucklehead for all the pranks he'd played on him. Said knucklehead just grumbled to himself before looking at the girl standing there giggling at him. "Who's that?" "Ah, where are my manners?" Hiruzen asked. "Naruto-kun, this is my niece Kaname Sarutobi. More like grandniece, but that makes me sound old, so I prefer niece." "Hi." The blonde waved to the girl, who waved back. The old man felt his lips rising in a small smirk. "Well, I'm afraid I must get back to work. Why don't you two spend the day together? Keep each other out of trouble." "Trouble? When have I ever been in trouble, Gramps?" Naruto demanded. "Since the day you could talk," was the nonchalant and immediate answer as the man sat down and began his daily battle with his paperwork. "Whatever, Gramps. Come on, Kaname-chan. Let's go eat some ramen." Naruto grabbed the young girl's hand and led her out the door, waving quickly to the man she simply called grandfather before closing the door and following her new blonde friend. Hiruzen chuckled as he continued his work. "Dolphin. Keep them safe," he said to the apparently empty room. Only a small pulse of chakra was the sign of the hidden Anbu operative obeying his orders. The Sandemi continued to work for a few more minutes, before temptation overwhelmed him and he drew out the crystal ball he used to perform his Tomgain no Jutsu and searched the village to find them in a training ground devouring a few bowls of ramen. He watched as they talked and ate, and couldn't help but laugh when he saw Naruto lunge at the young Sarutobi and began to tickle her mercilessly. He spotted Dolphin in a tree nearby, chuckling as he watched the two innocent children playing by themselves. Satisfied that they were safe, the cage cancelled his technique and returned the ball to its drawer. He spent the next few minutes considering the future of the two children he considered to be his own grandchildren. He knew Naruto would grow strong with the masters of Ryuzanpaku, but what of Kaname? What could he do for her? Suddenly his gaze fell on a picture hanging on his office wall. It was him, his wife, Bawako, and Hayato waving at the camera. She had been the one to convince them to take the picture together to celebrate the end of the Great War. Hayato's beard was slightly shorter and he had let the top of his green robe fall free, leaving his torso bare, exposing his powerful muscles, while Hiruzen's wife leaned against the then young Hokage's side, a serene smile on her face. Hiruzen himself was in his signature armor with Enma in his staff form leaning against his left side. The elder shinobi thought long over his choices. Asuma had left to join the 12 shinobi guardians and his eldest son had long since made it clear he had no intention of learning the ways of the staff. In his late years the legendary Tetsu no Sutafu was saddened to realize he had never passed on his own martial art to a successor. "Well, I'm just going to have to change that," he thought to himself as he stood from his desk and moved closer to the picture, raising a hand to touch the image of his late wife's face. Oh, how he longed to have her in his arms again. She had been the one to keep him anchored while immersed within the chaos of the war. "What would you think if you could see me, Bawako? Would you be proud of your monkey? Or would you be ashamed like I am every day I look in the mirror?" Hiruzen felt his resolve strengthen. He was not dead yet. He will pass on the teachings of the Sarutobi's style of Bojutsu to his niece and he will train her to become a warrior that will be able to stand side by side with the legend he knew the master's teachings would create in Naruto. The older generation must teach the new one after all, he thought to himself before pulling out a small scroll and began to write. If everything worked out as he planned, those two could make a perfect team. Unknown to either the old cage or the martial artist, another figure had taken note of the events that transpired within the village that night. This figure stood atop a water tower, the moon at her back as she watched the tower where the two had been talking. Her silhouette was cast in shadow by the light of the great orb, leaving only the shape of her body and the sight of her long flowing hair as it drifted in the wind. Full red lips turned upward in the smallest of smirks as she turned to face the gate and the forest beyond. "What are you scheming, Hayato?" she whispered to herself. XXXXXXXXXX, Naruto-kun, it's time to go, Hiruzen called to the young blonde still hugging his grandniece. I already promised to let her use my summons to write to you, so let's get going already. Kami, those two have been inseparable since they met, he grumbled in his head as the two children finally detached and he grabbed his surrogate by the back of his collar, nodded a farewell to Kaname and then took off into the forest, bound for Uzushiogakure and Naruto's new life. I hope you're ready for this, Naruto-kun, he said as the trees passed by him in a blur. Because will be the biggest change of your entire life. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sandaime Hokage and leader of the small party of travelers, found himself sitting at the bow of the small boat. His eyes scanned across the water in front of him, searching for a sign of any possible hazards ahead of him. He was well aware of the maelstroms riddling the waters around this island. They were one of the reasons this island had once been the home of Konoha's greatest allies, Uzushiogakure. Hiruzen felt sorrow grip his heart at the memory of when he had heard what had happened to the homeland of both Mito and Kushina. Two past kunoichi of the land that had come to Konohagakure, one to marry the Shodaime Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and the other to marry Minato Namikaze, Yondawa Hokage and father to Naruto Uzumaki. The old man turned his gaze to the boat, where Naruto himself was playing a game of shogi with the Inu masked Anbu, and losing terribly. He couldn't resist a chuckle when he saw the boy's face as he tried to concentrate and see what moves he could make. Hokage-sama, Hiruzen turned to see Tenzo addressing him from his place at the rudder. Shall I create a port so we may dock? The old man nodded. Yes, Tenzo. If I know Hayato like I believe I do, the masters of Ryazanpaku are already here and waiting for us. It would be best not to keep them waiting. Tenzo nodded and raised his hands to form the seals of his jutsu. Hiruzen felt a pulse of chakra pass through the boat and into the water below. Wooden pillars grew from just to the right of their position and all the way down to the shore. When they reached a certain height, square bars of wood sprouted from their sides and wove together into form a solid platform. In mere moments, Tenzo had created a decent-sized pier for the traveling group to dock the boat. Not wasting any time, Neko jumped up, rope in hand, and tied the boat to the pier. Glancing up, she noticed Inu holding the scroll containing the various supplies the Hokage had made them gather. He tossed the scroll and she reached out to catch it, only for a massive arm clad in a green sleeve and red gauntlet to shoot past her right ear and pluck it from the air. Startled, the young woman spun while sinking to a lower position and placing a hand on her sword, only to freeze when she saw the same man who had saved Naruto from the mob of civilians, smiling cheerfully while holding the scroll. She couldn't help but notice how small it looked compared to his large hand. "Well, hello there," he said while offering the scroll to her. "Welcome to Uzushiogakure. I trust your trip was uneventful for the most part." "We met with very little trouble, Hayato-san," Hiruzen said, tactfully ignoring the amused snort from Snake. The legendary fighter turned his gaze to the young woman currently hugging the living bundle of energy known as Naruto to her chest. "So this is young Uzumaki-san," he said, kneeling down until his own face was level with the boy's. The man held out a hand and introduced himself to the 5-year-old child. "Pleased to meet you, Naruto-san. I am Hayato Furanji. How are you?" Naruto laughed and shook the offered hand. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. Gramps said you were strong. Can you teach me some cool jutsu?" Hayato laughed at the eager gleam in the boy's eyes. It was refreshing to know the treatment he had received at the hands of those foolish civilians hadn't affected him as much as he had feared. Still, he had to marvel at the boy's ability to smile even through the pain he undoubtedly grew up suffering. It was truly inspiring to the old man. "I'm afraid ninjutsu isn't my specialty," he said, deflating the boy's excited mood. "My friends and I have never really had much use for any form of ninjutsu or genjutsu. Instead, we focused our training on an area usually only taken to a certain level by members of the shinobi groups." "Really? What is it?" "What?" The giant chuckled at the excited demands. "Why, taijutsu, of course." "Could you teach me some of that then?" This time every member of the group could not hold back a chuckle at the excited look in the blonde child's eyes. He truly was a bundle of energy. "Perhaps we should get settled in first, Naruto-kun," Hiruzen said, stepping forward and ruffling his hair. "Hayato-san, if you would please lead the way." The old master nodded and began to walk toward the forest lining the ocean. The shinobi fell in behind him before he disappeared into the trees. They walked in silence, save for the occasional question from Naruto, for several minutes until they came to an old path that wove between the trees. Hayato turned onto the path and followed it until it led him to a clearing. At the far end of the clearing stood an old stone gate Hiruzen assumed would most likely have been the front gate of Uzu when the village was still standing. Within the clearing stood 6 large tents. The first was the same color as the guide's kimono and had a small fire burning in front of it cooking 3 fish impaled on sticks and propped over the flames. Next to it stood a brown tent with a pile of broken sake bottles and an iron beam covered in what looked like fist-shaped indents. Next was a tent of blue fabric that was well kept and organized. In front of it stood a half-carved statue of a monk with his hands in front of him, appearing to be trying to grab something. They could also see a small table with an impressively drawn depiction of a battle between 2 giant demons, one wielding a spear and the other a pair of twin swords while lightning and fire twisted around them. Next in the line was a plain white one. Scattered all around this one was a series of wooden logs planted into the ground. Shuriken, kunai and several various other sharp, pointy objects had been left sticking from the rough wood, and there was also a large fire pit with what looked like a filtration system and a forge. Apparently whoever owned this one was a weapons enthusiast. Next was a rather disheveled yellow tent. Several small animals ranging from rabbits and squirrels to all kinds of birds were gathered around it, crawling in and out of the opening without a care in the world. Although the training poles snapped in half all around the tent did leave the newcomers slightly on edge. Of course the fact they were as thick as trees might have been the real reason for that. Finally there was a dark green tent. Unknown to the rest of the party, Hiruzen and Inu felt a slight calling to them coming from this last tent. They were struck with an almost irresistible urge to pull out their autographed copies of Icha Icha Paradise and begin to read. Fortunately, for them and their precious books, the two managed to quell their desire and moved on. Hidden beneath their masks, both Snake and Neko were staring at the tent as well, one feeling a sense of curiosity and the other a spike of righteous feminine fury. "Please forgive the lack of a welcoming party," Hayato said. "I ask that my associates spend their time exploring the island and salvaging what they can. They will return shortly so we can simply wait here to meet them. Would you care to have some fish while we wait?" The group agreed and took a seat around the fire while Hayato placed more fish out to cook. Soon they were enjoying a simple meal and sharing stories of past exploits. Mostly it was Hiruzen and Hayato who talked of the several times they had fought together during the Great War, while the Anbu and young Naruto listened in awe. Even for shinobi, the things they described were beyond anything a normal man might have been able to believe. Hayato was just starting to explain what had happened when he had come upon 2 squadrons of Jonin from Iwagakure when a loud shout interrupted him. "Hey old man! I found a few more of those scrolls you and Akasame were so interested in." Their group turned to see a man walking toward him from through the gate at the edge of the clearing. He was tall with darkly tanned skin and wearing a brown leather jacket with the sleeves rolled up to his biceps over a bare chest, blue jeans secured with a brown belt and black pointed boots. Around his wrists he had tied bandages, most likely for extra wrist support and to wipe off sweat. His eggplant-colored hair was cut short and slicked back save for a single strand hanging over his face. In one hand he carried a small bag while a larger one was hanging from a rope from his back. In the other he held a small piece of rope that was looped around neck of a large white jug marked with the kanji for sake. "Ah Shio, excellent timing," Hayato called, waving the man over. "Leave them next to Akasame's tent. We can have a look at them later, for now come meet our guests." The man did as the old master asked and walked over to greet them. "So, are these the ones you told us about? Where's this brat that's so special you actually offered to train him?" Hiruzen made to introduce himself but was cut off by an indignant shout. "Hey? Who you callin' a brat muscles?" Naruto had jumped up from Neko's lap and was pointing at Shio with an angry glare. Shio just laughed at the kid's antics. "You got spunk, kid," he said, placing a hand on top of Naruto's head and ruffling his hair. That's good. Suddenly a burning red aura seemed to envelop him and his eyes began to shine with a bright menacing light. You're gonna need it if the old man plans on training your scrawny hide. Everyone, this is Shio Sakaki, Hayato said. He is one of the masters staying at Ryazanpaku. Wait, Shio Sakaki, all eyes turned to Inu. By any chance are you the 100th Dan karate master? Shio grinned and clenched his fist, the knuckles popping sinisterly from the pure pressure in his grip. Yeah, why? You itchin' for a fight? Inu hastily brought his hands up in the universal sign of panic. No, that wasn't it at all. My friend Guy is always talking about how the only one he ever faced in taijutsu and lost to was the 100th Dan karate master, and he keeps ranting about how he wants a rematch against you. He's kept challenging me to fight so he can train up and take you on again. Shio started laugh. You mean that spandex-wearing guy with the huge eyebrows? That had to be the funnest fight I ever had. He sure made me work for that victory. Be sure to tell him I'll take him on anytime, any place. So these are the people from Konohagakure you were so eager to meet here? A voice said from behind the group. They turned to see a man of short stature standing there, smiling kindly. He was dressed in a green top that reached his feet and was cut up the sides to his waist and black kung fu-style pants with black slip-on shoes. From underneath the hat protruded brown hair and a long, pointed-out Chinese mustache. Hey Kensei, Shio called. Welcome back, where you been? I was exploring and mapping the island like the elder requested. I happened to find a few natural hot springs and old buildings. I just finished my part of the map, so I decided to return. Kensei held out a scroll to Hayato, who traded it for a freshly cooked salmon. It's good to know I wasn't the only one being productive while we were waiting, another voice said as a new person joined the group. The man was dressed in a loose-fitting blue and white hakama and his dark brown hair was slightly rumpled, almost as if he had been sleeping recently. His pale-colored eyes moved over the group, almost like he was analyzing them, while an idle hand stroked the neatly trimmed mustache on his upper lip. His movements were calm and simple as he plucked a fish from its spot by the fire and sat down next to Hiruzen, yet to the trained eyes of the veteran warriors he carried the grace of a man who had mastered the movements of his body and knew it. Tell me Sakaki, what did you do? He questioned the karate master before taking a bite of his meal. Hey! Don't lump me together with that airhead Apache. I was exploring the ruins and found a few of those scrolls you were so hyped up on getting, and this is the thanks I get. Akasame, Sakaki growled, pointing at the blue tent with the statue and the bag sitting next to its opening. Akasame opened his mouth to speak, no doubt to deliver a retort, but was interrupted by a loud crash as one of the trees at the edge of the clearing was knocked over by a massive tiger. The Ambu leaped up, ready to draw their swords, only for the masters to stop them. There's no need to worry, Akasame said, now standing with a hand on Weasel's shoulder. The tiger is no threat. Hey! Guess what? Apache found new kitty. We can keep her, right? The shinobi looked up to see a large man sitting on top of the tiger's back. The man was dressed in a yellow tank top, red shorts and had bandages tied around his hands and feet. His silver hair was cut short and made to stand straight up courtesy of the red monkol tied around his forehead. Apache! Sakaki yelled. Stop freaking out our guests. I swear that guy has some issues. It's quite all right, Hiruzen said. The animal seems to be perfectly docile, so there's no need to worry. Stop worrying so much, Shio, Hayato said as he gulped down yet another fish. Besides, you should be used to Apache's actions by now. Sakaki grumbled and was about to sit down when Naruto made his presence known once again. Awesome. The little boy took off like a rocket and climbed up the tiger's front leg until he was sitting in front of Apache. It's so high and this cat is so warm. Can we keep her, Gramps? Please? This act caused both Hiruzen and Hayato to erupt into fits of laughter while the others simply watched, the Anbu still apprehensive around the beast and the masters calmly eating their food while watching. When Hayato finally managed to stop laughing, he placed his fish down and stroked his beard while watching the group talking. Well then, I guess everyone is here, right Shiga? At the elder's words, a young girl appeared from the tree branches above his head. Hanging by her feet, she appeared to be a few years older than Naruto but not by far. The girl had raven-colored hair tied up in ponytail and was dressed in a pink short kimono with mesh armor underneath and black stockings. Her expression seemed to be one of disinterest, but she still kept her eye constantly scanning over the group. The way she hung so effortlessly showed a certain level of training and discipline considering the strain it would normally have on one so young. Quickly falling down to stand at the raven-haired girl's side was a girl the same age as Naruto with bright blonde hair and blue eyes and seemed to radiate a cheerful aura. She was dressed in a pink sweater over a purple skin-tight jumpsuit. "Hey grandfather," she called, running up and hugging the large man. "I'm back." "So you are my dear? And how was your day with Shiga?" Hayato asked, placing a hand on the young girl's head and gently petting her hair. "It was fun. We saw a lot of animals and she let me play in the old buildings too. I'm glad to hear that, Mew-chan, and you can tell me all about it later. For now, why don't we all introduce ourselves?" he asked the group. Hiruzen nodded and stood up, catching the group's attention. "That seems like a good idea, Hayato-san. I'll go first. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi, I am the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure and I'm very pleased to meet you all. To my right is Inu, followed by Snake and Neko, and on left are Tenzo and Weasel, and of course up there on top of the tiger is Naruto Uzumaki, a boy I cherish as if he were my own grandson and for whom I have traveled out here to bring to you." Hayato nodded. "I guess it's my turn. Well, I am Hayato Furanji. With me are Shio Sakaki, Akasame Kurtsuji, Kensei Ma, Shiga Kusaka, and there on the tiger is Apachai Hopachai. Lastly there is my granddaughter Mew. I have explained our circumstances to them and they have agreed to help me raise the boy, should he prove receptive of our lifestyles." Hiruzen nodded and turned to Tenzo. "I believe we should start with your lodgings. Now, judging from the amount of people who will be staying here, I'd say you need a 2-story house with a connected dojo. The house will need a separate room for each of the masters, Mew and Naruto, plus at least 2 restrooms, a living room and a kitchen." Tenzo nodded and rose to his feet. "I will have to ask that everyone gather their things and go stand by the gate. I will need a lot of room to work." Hiruzen and the shinobi nodded and ran for the gate. The masters were a little behind, slightly confused by the Anbu's words. Once they were out of the clearing, Tenzo swiftly made a series of hand signs. When he reached the last sign, he flared his chakra and slammed both palms into the ground. Makuten. Shichuka no Jutsu. Wooden pillars erupted from the earth all around the kneeling Anbu, forming the very structure the Sandaime had described. The masters couldn't hide their impressed expressions while Hiruzen himself felt a hint of nostalgia. To see a jutsu his sensei had once used when they had traveled together with him, his brother and his teammates, it made him think of when times had been peaceful and when he didn't feel like he was carrying the world on his shoulders. He shook off those thoughts and walked up to place a hand on Tenzo's shoulder. "Well done," he said to the panting shinobi. He was no Hashirama, and crafting a boat, a pier and a house with pure chakra took a large chunk out of his reserves. "Go back with the others, my turn is here." Tenzo nodded and walked over to join the spectators. Once he was clear, Hiruzen began to form his own series of hand signs. When his hands slammed into the earth, it was with the shout of "Doten! Doryuheki!" At his call the very ground rose up and formed a high wall of pure chakra-infused rock and earth surrounding the newly created compound. A single opening in the wall would serve as a gate, other than that the wall was completely solid. "This is our gift to you," he said as Weasel also presented the scroll of supplies to the elder. "This compound and that scroll are our way of expressing our gratitude for helping Naruto-kun." Hayato took the scroll and handed it to Akasame before offering a hand to his old friend. "We are glad to help. When do you wish for the boy to return to the village?" "I will have made quite a few changes by the time he is ready to return," Hiruzen said, shaking the elder's hand. "One of them will be the graduation age for Jinan in the academy. The class of his age group will graduate on the year of their 16th birthday. I've included some subjects I plan on adding to the curriculum. Please be sure to train him in these as well." Hayato nodded, but then his kind smile changed to a serious frown. You do realize we will be teaching him the path of Katsujinkan. If he is raised not to kill, how do you expect him to serve as a shinobi? Hiruzen sighed. If there is one thing I know, old friend, you will tell him the truth about his lineage and what he holds. That means he will have to choose whether or not he will become a shinobi. In case he does choose that, I've left books for training in that area, plus with your training he will have a respect for life. He turned to look at the ruins of Uzu. Just because we shinobi are forced to take the life of our adversary or the enemies of our clients at times in the lives we lead, we should still have a respect for life. Life is precious, and that means we should still have respect for it. All I ask is that you give him that respect regardless of the path he chooses to walk in his future. The master nodded once more. I understand, Hiruzen. We will give him the choice and stand by him no matter what his future may hold. Now you had best go. Your home awaits its leader. The two veterans parted ways with a shake of the hand and a wave goodbye. One left to return to his home while the other to begin training the newest student. But first, another matter needed to be handled. Akasame, why don't you and the others get settled in? I have some business to take care of. The philosophical master nodded silently and turned to organize the breakdown of the small camp while Hayato made for the ruins. He ran for several minutes, moving easily from the ground to skip up the side of a building and across rooftops until he stopped atop one of the few intact towers that remained. He remained perched there for a long moment, simply enjoying the way a passing breeze would playfully tug at his beard. How long do you plan to follow me without saying a word? He asked the seemingly lifeless landscape. There was a shifting of the wind and then a new figure appeared, her back facing the blonde master as she too gazed out on the ruins of the old city. It is a shame what happened to this land, she said, her voice soft and barely breaching the level of a whisper. It was almost as if she didn't wish to stir the spirits of the long dead. They were such good people. We both had many friends here, Hayato said, his voice also uncharacteristically low. I mourn their passing every day. And now you seek to teach one of the few remaining heirs to their lineage, she mused as she fingered the string of prayer beads that looped around her neck. A truly honorable thing to do, Hayato-kun. You seem strangely interested, Kashinada. Care to sate an old man's curiosity? Full red lips curled into a small smirk which she hid behind the billowing sleeves of her traditional white robes which fluttered like a flag in the wind along with her red hakama. Her long brown-black hair flowed like a river down her back, swaying in the gentle breeze. I see the same potential you do, Hayato-kun. But I know you will not let me approach him. Our ideals are too different, yet still I cannot help but be curious myself. The great master was silent for quite a while, his blue eyes staring out at the sunset far in the distance as he stroked his beard. Kashinada waited patiently, knowing all too well how her old friend could ponder things for hours on end without saying a word. Finally, her patience was rewarded by the sound of his voice once more. Tell me, do you plan to be in Hai no Kuni someday in the near future? Having a hunch what her former partner may be contemplating, she moved to answer while still remaining neutral. Only if business were to take me there. The old man sighed. I can already see Naruto choosing the way of the shinobi. It is his lineage and his fate. As masters of Katsujinkan, we of Ryazanpaku will not be able to do as much for him when his time to rejoin his village comes. However, you may be able to assist him now and then. And what makes you believe I would do such a thing, since I plan to have a student to pass on my own art to someday? This time it was Hayato's turn to chuckle. You've already admitted it yourself. You can see potential Naruto contains within him. Why would something that interests you not garner a little of your time? We will leave him instructions on how to continue his training, of course. So all he would need is occasional training tips to keep him on the path of mastery. His grin widened even further, and had she been facing him she would have seen what appeared to be a strange white light shining from his eyes. Besides, I know you well enough that I can tell when something has truly piqued your interest, and we both are well aware of how you react with the few things you deem special. After all, even with all the roaming and mindless wandering we do, I somehow manage to run into you at least once a year. I still owe you for that bean jam bun, don't I? For a moment they remained quiet, he watching the sunset over an endless watery horizon and she the gentle swaying of the trees in the late afternoon wind. Finally, her lips once more turned upwards into a small smile. You presume much, old friend," she said. "But then you have always been an insightful sort, haven't you?" Her piece said. She vanished just as she appeared, in a breath of wind scented with the smell of nature. Hayato did not move or speak for several minutes afterward. His cerulean eyes were focused on the great orb in the sky as it sank slowly below the horizon and the cool blanket of night was cast over the world. Sometime later, the masters were gathered in the dojo to beginning planning for Naruto's future. The child in question was currently curled up with the tiger Apache had come to simply name Tora in the far corner, both sleeping deeply and enjoying each other's warmth. "So, we really are taking this runt-in, huh?" Shio asked, taking a swig of sake. "Are we all teaching him? Because I don't think he'd survive my kinda training, old man." "Only those who wish to teach him will take him as their students," Hayato said. "It was my choice to bring us here, but I will not force you to do something you don't wish to." "But of course when you talk like that we can't help but think of doing such a thing, Elder," Kensei responded, eyes focused on a familiar orange book. "After all, I must admit to being curious if whether or not the boy is capable of surviving our training considering the origin of his bloodline." "Indeed, it is most intriguing," Akasame agreed. "Which is why I am all for starting his basic training tomorrow morning. You may observe and deduce it for yourself." "I will not be able to stay," Hayato said. "I have to continue Miu's training and she needs to travel and see the world. Still, it will do good to have a friend, so I will wait for 4 months to pass before we leave. I can delay no further than that, I'm afraid." Akasame nodded. "That is important. Besides, Naruto-kun will require a great deal of training before he is ready to handle your style, Elder. We will give him a good foundation in the basics before even considering techniques, let alone your more excessive style of conditioning." "You do have a point there. All right then, I leave his training in your hands, Akasame. Now then, let's break for bed. An old man needs his rest after all." "You talk like you're not gonna outlive us all, old man," Shio said, sharing a chuckle with Kensei while the elder walked away. "Seriously, that guy has enough energy to keep going for another 100 years, I'd say." The other masters soon began to drift away and settle into their own nightly routines, waiting for the next morning when the real fun would begin. Resting in the shadows of an old cave, the figure stared into the dancing flames of his campfire. "So, he sent him out of the village?" His question was directed to the large monkey sitting across from him, who nodded. "Yes, and he's been taken in by the Superman of all people." Hayato Furanji. "Well, looks like he wants to make sure the kid becomes a powerhouse. Maybe I should drop by sometime and see how he's doing." "Well, you are known to travel all over the place, Jiraiya. Perhaps you could happen to wander that way eventually." The old sage chuckled and took a bite from the roast snake he'd been preparing. "Besides, I could take a little vacation too and see how his training's going. Still, it'll take a bit before I mosey on that way. Kiri's civil war is getting heated, and if the old man wants the bloodline supporters to win, I need to keep giving him information." The monkey nodded. "I will be sure to tell Hiruzen-sama the information. Is there anything else you would like me to pass on?" "Yeah. Tell him to send some extra supplies my way. Mei's group isn't doing as well as we'd hoped, so a little extra would go a long way in keeping us friendly." "I understand. Good night, Jiraiya-san." With that, the monkey disappeared and left the last active Sannin alone to stew in his own thoughts. "I'm sorry I couldn't help your kid, Minato," he thought. "I don't know if you'd understand my reasoning or not, although I'm pretty sure that firecracker of yours would have castrated me. She probably will too now that I think about it. Just more reason to keep living, I guess." Okay. So the last chapter was spent introducing Naruto to the masters of Ryuzanpaku and saying goodbye to Hiruzen. We got to see Hayato meet with Kishinada for a sec and set up some grounds for the future. Naruto went to bed and his training was to begin the next day. That is where we pick up with this chapter. On with the Torah, **I mean training. Naruto's training began early and violently. With careful steps Akasame moved across the dojo, the fresh wood holding firmly as his slender body took each step with gentle ease. Once he stood over the resting Naruto, he paused long enough to commit the lovable scene of the blonde curled up with the tiger to memory. Such a natural scene in real life was a rare thing. He may even considering immortalizing it later in a painting. Once the image was secured in his mind, the master a deep breath. His eyes opened to reveal shining lights in a manifestation of his fighting spirit as he let out his battle cry. "Wake up!" Tora bolted the instant he shouted, leaving Naruto screaming bloody murder as he tried to follow only to be snagged by the collar by the jujitsu master. "Well, now that you're awake, let's begin your morning training," he said before dragging the blonde child to the doorway. Naruto was, of course, not amused. "What? It's still dark out." "Yes, early morning is the perfect time to do training," Akasame argued. "The cool air, the feeling of waking up through physical exercise as the world slowly joins you in its rise from the slumber of night. Truly, there is nothing like a morning of training." In an instant they were standing outside the gates of the complex. The young blonde was currently dressed in an odd contraption of springs and straps that made it difficult for him to even take a step. It happened so fast he was suffering from whiplash. "Ah, Akasame, what am I supposed to do with this?" "Why, you're going to run, of course," the pale-eyed artisan replied, smirking as he gazed down at the dumbstruck eyes of his new disciple. "Get to it, 5 laps around the compound. After that Kensei will be giving you some exercises to help with your leg strength and then you'll have breakfast." When Naruto looked like he was about to argue, the master played his trump card. "What's the matter, Naruto? Are you planning to give up so soon?" The 5-year-old balked at the question while Akasame simply stared at him with his eyes aglow with an ominous light. "We of Ryazanpaku have endured much more than a simple endurance exercise. Do you plan to quit before you've even begun?" From his perch on the wall above them, Hayato smiled as he watched the look on Naruto's face change to one of determination. He felt a slight sense of pride he couldn't explain as he took that first step of 5 laps, gaining speed with each step until he was managing a slow jogging pace. "He's really gonna do it, grandfather?" He looked down to see Mew staring at the boy with wide eyes, unable to believe the effort he was putting into such a thing. Even if he had trained her since the day she could walk, it still intrigued her to see the determination of others. The giant known as the invincible superhuman placed a gentle hand on his granddaughter's head as he smiled down at her confused stare. "Of the many Uzumaki I had the privilege of knowing in my time, all of them were known to be excessively stubborn," he said. His features darkened for just a moment as he recalled why that very stubbornness could also be a double-edged weapon. Still, he shook it off and continued to smile at the young girl. "I can tell just from what I see now that he bears that same fighting spirit and that he will truly become a powerful warrior, and I intend to make sure you can walk at his side when the time comes, Mew. Now come, you have your own training to get to." "Yes, sir." The little blonde girl gave a cute salute and hopped onto her grandpa's shoulder. He paused long enough to make sure she was secure, spared one last glance at the retreating boy's back as he rounded the first corner, and then launched from the wall into the trees. XXXXXXXXXXX 2 hours of running plus another hour of leg exercises left Naruto drained and a pile of putty on the floor of the dojo. The Kenpo master soon returned bearing a plate with a healthy amount of fish, rice and eggs which he placed next to the exhausted pupil. It was quickly joined by a bowl of miso soup and a pair of chopsticks. "You'd best eat, Naruto," he instructed. "We begin your basic training in 1 hour." His only response was a groan as the boy managed to haul himself to his feet and give the vertically challenged man the evil eye. Like a man possessed he attacked the food, scarfing it down in only a few seconds before returning to his place on the matted floor. True to his word, Kensei returned an hour later and ordered him to walk around the island while swinging his arms high above him, switching their position with each step. Many forms in Kenpo require one to utilize their arms in a manner similar to that of a whip, he had said. In order for that to happen, you must first loosen the muscles of your arms so they are accustomed to the movement and you'll be able to attack like so. Facing a wooden pole, the master stepped forward while lashing out with his right hand. It connected and sliced through the bean like a hot knife through butter to the astonishment of the observing child. The green-clad man slipped his hands into the sleeves of his robes and turned to face his wide-eyed disciple. "Now begin." So the morning passed until he made 3 trips around the island, alternating exercises each time. After arm swings it was what he called a duck walk, keeping his knees bent low to the ground with his fingers interlocked behind his head. After that it was lunges. Finally they had lunch. After that Akasame appeared once again and whisked poor Naruto to his room. There he began learning how to read and made his first attempts at calligraphy. Of course the attempt was horrible, but the master insisted it had taken him a long time to master the art himself. He also said that it was a good way to help him learn the martial arts. Such activities require discipline and the ability to perform fluid motion with your hand and wrist, Akasame explained as he drew the character for sword. It was once believed that if you were a true master of martial arts, then you were also a master in the art of calligraphy as well. He paused to chuckle to himself. Of course I and possibly Shiga are the only ones who seem capable of living up to that particular legend. Master and disciple shared a brief moment to appreciate the humor of his statement before continuing in their work. After the lessons it was dinner and then straight to bed. It was only as he began to drift into the pleasant embrace of slumber that Naruto realized the awful truth. This was exactly what was going to happen tomorrow. XXXXX timeskip XXXXX 3 weeks. 3 weeks had passed since the first day Naruto had begun the physical training under the tutelage of the philosophical jujitsu master and the perverted master of all Kenpo. In that time period he had grown until he was capable of finishing his morning workout in only 2 hours and could read quite well. His writing still required a great deal of work but was almost legible now. "Listen closely Naruto," Akasame addressed his disciples seated across from him on the floor of the dojo. "I realize that you are frustrated by the lack of technique training we have provided you and I wish to explain. In order to make sure you could handle both the physical and mental strain our training will place on you, we devised a plan to build your strength and stamina while testing your resolve. I'm proud to say you've passed with flying colors, but don't think you're out of the woods yet." Naruto nodded. He had learned early on that it was best to sit quietly and let his master finish before he began to ask questions. Being rude tended to result in a particularly nasty bit of training later in the day. His patience was rewarded when Akasame decided to move on with his next point. "Now then, first I need to explain the role of martial arts in the world of the shinobi and samurai." With a snap of the fingers, Apachai appeared holding a large scroll in his even larger hands. The good-natured giant unfurled the scroll showing a long series of ink paintings. Akasame pointed to the first illustration decorating the parchment that depicted a large battlefield of men in armor. "A long time ago there was only war," the learned master explained. "It covered the land like a plague and all suffered its wrath. Nobody knew how to use chakra in the beginning, thus a different type of combat was born, the martial arts." The pale-eyed master moved a finger from the battlefield picture to the next one. A design detailing a group of men and women all in various stances. Different regions and cultures gave birth to different versions of the art best suited for their purposes. Next he indicated a drawing with a man sitting in a meditative position, a powerful aura surrounding his body and little kanji floating around him with the names of the 5 basic elements. Of course, when the world of ninjutsu was created, many would believe that something as simple as martial arts would not survive with all the extravagant techniques that appeared. However, those people failed to take one thing into consideration, that martial arts are always evolving. Apachai backed away while Akasame held out his right hand and after only a few seconds it was covered in a barely visible blue aura that flickered like a heatless flame. The masters of old incorporated the lessons bearing the use of chakra into their art and created a new branch of techniques and styles using that inner power. Just as each art is different, so too are the ways they use chakra. Jiu-jitsu bases its practice primarily on creating a layer just over the skin of the user's body. This layer makes them incredibly sensitive to the nearby environment and allows them to react with record timing. The aura faded and the pale-eyed master couldn't help but smile at the awed look he was once again treated to see on Naruto's face. He truly could never get enough of the awed wonder with which a child gazed at the world. Anyway, before we get into any of that fun stuff, you need to unlock your chakra. Normally, an instructor would have the student meditate in order to do such a thing. The problem with our situation is that, unlike most children your age, you have a massive pool of chakra that is at least as large as an average tunan. Large chakra reserves in a child can affect your ability to calm your mind and meditate. So we need to use an alternate method. Attack me. Naruto blinked, and blinked again. What? Akasame rose from his standing position and squared off with the young blonde. You can't meditate in the usual way. Your chakra levels make it literally impossible to calm your mind. So, instead of calming your mind, I want you to try and strike at me. I won't attack, I promise. I will only block and redirect your movements. The goal is not to hit me, but to fall into a constant pattern of movement. When you start acting on instinct instead of directed planning, you should start to feel your chakra pools activating out of instinct. Naruto swallowed nervously. He had watched the masters sparring before. He knew just how powerful they were, and he was not very comfortable with the thought of attacking one of them. Why, you promised not to attack me. Akasame nodded and Naruto sighed. The blonde shifted his stance, pulling his right foot back slightly and keeping his thighs close together, raising his fists to chest level. For a moment they paused, and then Naruto charged, fist extended. The punch met the master's palm and was deflected harmlessly to the side. You have to do better than that, Naruto, Akasame said, once again deflecting another strike with ease. The next half hour was filled with endless movement. By then Naruto was covered in sweat as he tried again and again to hit the man that had organized most of his training. Meanwhile, Akasame observed his disciple closely. They had been working for quite a while, and yet, instead of labored breathing, the boy showed no signs of tiring. When he noticed the boy's deep blue eyes were beginning to zone in and out of concentration, thin lips curled into a slight smile as he observed Naruto's actions. It's starting to work, he thought to himself. It won't be much longer now. Within Naruto's own mind, things were different. He was beginning to feel a steady pace sink into his movements. With each moment that passed he began to feel calm, and he could hear the steady drumming of his heartbeat in his ears. There was a calm blanket falling over his mind. Wait. He could feel something other than his heartbeat. Energy, moving through his body like a powerful current in a raging river. You can feel it, can't you? Akasame's voice seemed to echo around the boy. You can feel the power in your body. The boy's vision turned completely black, and yet he kept moving, somehow instinctually knowing where his master was standing. Through it all he felt the current, slowly gaining in strength as the man's hypnotic words rang through his mind. It's boiling to the surface with an intensity that demands it be set free. Cling to that feeling, Naruto. That is your power. Draw it the surface, and let it erupt. Energy, pure energy erupted from the boy like an eruption from a volcano. Like a tsunami, the energy swept across the dojo with the fury of a storm. Akasame raised a hand to block the light coming from his disciple. As quickly as it had appeared, the bright glow was gone, and all that was left was the occasional light gust of breeze that ruffled the sleeves of the child's white karate gi. Well done, Naruto, Akasame said. You've awoken your chakra. From his seat leaning against the outer wall of the dojo, a certain karate master smiled as he took a sip of sake. Geez, I can feel his chakra from here, he mused. I guess he really is a maelstrom after all, Gramps. Hayato chuckled from his place next to the brawler. He paused in the licking of his lollipop to reply to the younger man's inquiry. The name suits him quite well, don't you think? Kensei smiled as he turned yet another page in his Ero magazine before adding his own 2 cents to the pot. A true storm incarnate. With power like that and the training we'll be putting him through, he could very well become a living force of chaos. Even though he could hear the peanut gallery outside the dojo, Akasame kept his eyes on the young boy in front of him. Now that you've unlocked it, are you ready to begin learning how to control it? Naruto grinned and returned to his original stance. Bring it on. XXXXXXXXXX. So, the masters of Raya Zanpaku took on a disciple. Kusanada stood in the center of a room dimly lit by the few torches lining its thick stone walls. Her ever-stoic expression was directed to a shadowed figure resting in a covered box. Yes, and the elder has expressed an interest in me training him occasionally. And do you plan to? The boy interests me, she admitted after a moment of silence. I will see how he progresses in the future. If he continues to interest me, then I may consider stepping in. Unseen by the mistress of ancient martial arts, the figure smiled slightly. To have caught your eye, he must have been an interesting one indeed. A gauntleted hand rose to hover just in front of a dazzling blue eye and clenched into a fist that the woman knew could break stone with the ease some show when breathing. Perhaps I too should take a look at this. Naruto Uzumaki. XXXXX timeskip XXXXX, 98, 99, 100. Alright. You finished your morning exercises, Kensei told his student, who had currently just finished his second set of vertical push-ups. Be sure to give your present to Mew. The elder wishes to leave immediately after breakfast, so you better be sure to say goodbye before it's too late. Naruto nodded and turned to make his way toward the main house, the Kenpo master watching him over the top of his ever-present Ero magazine. The boy had grown much during his 4 months of training with the masters of Ryo-Zanpaku. Kensei and Akasame both worked diligently to bring his already impressive stamina to godlike levels, and they had taught him a few basic techniques. Even the elder had ordained to teach him a defensive technique, Koho Haiho, a technique that utilized an opponent's blind spot and used their own attack against them. With a hearty diet packed with nutrients and a physical training schedule that would leave some grown men quaking in their boots, Naruto was well on his way to becoming a powerful warrior, of this he had no doubt. With Shiga guiding him in basic stealth and trapping techniques, the boy had taken to the lessons like a fish to water. Every day you could find the young teenager and 5-year-old slipping through the ruins of the lost city of Uzushiogakure, avoiding each other's traps while seeking to ensnare their opponent. Stealth, strength, speed and well-practiced chakra control. Kensei began to wonder just how powerful their disciple would become in the coming years. While the second eldest master of the dojo was off in his thoughts, Naruto had taken a shower and was just stepping into his room to grab a fresh change of clothes when he noticed the little figure resting on his dresser. "Well, hello Arashi," he greeted the capuchin monkey as it jumped to his shoulder and offered him a scroll. "Hiya Naruto," he replied. "How's the training?" "Brutal as always," was the terrified return as the blonde disposed of his towel and slipped on a pair of loose black pants similar to the ones Kensei wore. "How's Kaname-chan?" "She's getting pretty good with that staff of hers. Wouldn't want to tick her off in the future." Naruto chuckled before plopping down in a chair and breaking the seal, keeping the scroll tightly rolled up. The small smile on his lips was one of content as he read the words written by his oldest friend. "Good day Naruto. I hope this letter finds you well. From your last letter it seems your training is progressing favorably. I honestly look forward to seeing what you're capable of when you return. Grandfather has begun to teach me the first steps in our clan's Bojutsu style. I can't help but wonder if his training methods are legal though. Tell me, do any of your masters acquire a strange glow before they begin, as you put it, pound you into paste? Sadly, I don't have long to write. It is late and grandfather is planning to send the messenger tonight. I hope I can receive your reply in short time. Sincerely, Kaname Sarutobi." Naruto grinned and set the scroll down. "I'll send you back later," he told the silently observing monkey as he got up to make for the main house. "I've got a meal waiting on me." "Ah, Naruto," Hayato greeted the young boy with a smile and wave. "And little Arashi-kun as well. You're just in time, we were just beginning to wonder where you were. I see you finished your morning exercises in time for breakfast." Naruto returned the wave with one of his own before sitting down next to Mew and picking up a pair of chopsticks. Arashi quickly jumped to the giggling blonde girl's shoulder where he was quickly offered a small peach he began to devour with gusto. The simple meal of fish and rice provided for Naruto was quickly devoured and the others were dismissed to attend to their own time-wasting hobbies until it was time for the final farewells. For most of the masters, training was the usual method of passing time. For young Naruto and Mew, the two had decided to spend their last hour also together by sitting on the roof. Mew was sitting on the very peak of the building while Naruto decided to stretch himself out on the slope next to her. Arashi curled himself up on the boy's stomach and began soaking in the rays of the rising run. "I don't want to leave," the blonde girl said, staring up at the sky, just turning bright as the sun peeked over the horizon. "I'm happy here. I can play with you and we train together. Why can't I just stay here?" "Because we both have different styles to learn," Naruto said. "The old man said he plans to hand down all of his techniques and knowledge of martial arts to you. Sure, he'll teach me a few things when he gets back, but you'll be the one who succeeds him." The poor girl shook her head, puppy pout in full bloom as she did so. "But why can't he train me here? I overheard Akasame-sensei and Kensei Shifu talking about it a few days ago." Naruto sat up and faced his friend. "They said we'd distract each other too much. We'll spend so much time worrying about each other that we'll slack in our training, and that isn't good. Besides, the old man promised to bring you back a couple years before I have to go back to Konohagakure, so it's not like we'll never see each other again." As Mew silently pondered her friend's words, Naruto was inwardly thanking those two for drilling proper logical thinking into his head, otherwise he'd be in hot water with his fellow blonde right then. Finally, the young girl sighed. "Fine, but I still don't like it." Naruto laughed, watching as Mew's pout grew even cuter, something he believed impossible. "I don't either. I just accept it." "Oh yeah, I almost forgot." The boy rummaged in his pocket and pulled out a small box wrapped in purple paper with a bright red bow. "I got you something," he said, offering the box to Mew. The girl quickly grabbed the package and ripped through the paper like a cat would a bag of catnip. Inside she found a small hair clip colored a burnt orange with a black Uzumaki swirl in the center. "I found it when I was exploring the ruins," Naruto explained. "I thought it would help remind you of me and that we would always be friends." Mew smiled and wrapped her arms around the nervous blonde, calming his fears of rejection with that simple gesture. The blonde girl quickly placed the clip in her hair, along with the two red ones she had as remnants of her mother. Now she had two things to remember her precious people by. "I don't have anything to give you though." The girl suddenly became distraught. She had gotten such a nice gift, but she didn't have anything to give him. Dawning realization struck the girl and she placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "Wait right here," she ordered, and jumped down to the floor and ran into the house. A few minutes later she came running back out and jumped back up to retake her place next to Naruto. "Grandpa gave this to me after he came back from one of his travels," she said, holding a small yin-yang pin. "I want you to hold on to this until I get back, okay?" Naruto nodded and attached the pin to the waist of his pants, since he had yet to don a shirt. "We'll keep these with us. We'll never lose them and we'll never forget each other." The two hugged. Just in time for the elder to begin calling for them. They jumped down to find the masters gathered at the gates of the compound. Hayato had a bag slung over his shoulder and a smaller one held in his right hand, which he offered to Mew. The young girl took it and climbed onto the old man's back, peeking over his left shoulder. "We best be off," Hayato said. "I'm trusting you all to make sure Naruto becomes a powerful disciple." The masters all nodded in return and the giant turned his eyes down to the blonde in question. "Naruto, I expect you to train hard and not to complain. Your will is strong and your heart is pure. Never lose that. You remind me of myself so much when I was your age. This means I expect great things from you. Don't let me down." Naruto nodded, grinning broadly as he gave him a thumbs up. "You can count on me, old man." The masters chuckled at the boy's enthusiasm. They were all eager to see just how far their disciple would grow under their tutelage. Hayato and Mew bid them all a final farewell before the old man turned and charged off into the horizon, leaving only a cloud of dust as evidence of his ever being there. "Well then," Akasame said, getting the attention of the remaining inhabitants of the dojo. "Now that we've said our goodbyes, I believe it's time we gathered and began to plan out our young disciples' training schedule." Every master suddenly became tense and Naruto could have sworn he saw their eyes glowing. "Let's go inside the dojo and I'll show you a plan I've been working on," the philosophical jujitsu master said, turning and walking toward said dojo with the others in tow. During the small walk back, Naruto couldn't help but wonder whether or not he should have begged to go with the old man after all. Once inside, everyone sat down on the floor while Akasame pulled out a chalkboard from a nearby room. Once it was in front of the group, he took a piece of chalk and wrote Jiu-Jitsu, Karate, Muay Thai, Kempo, Weapons, and Shinobi along the top part. Once that was done, he turned and addressed his audience. Now, not only are we teaching young Naruto our separate styles of martial arts, we have also been tasked with teaching him shinobi skills by the Hokage. Now, Shiga and myself have the most experience in shinobi techniques. She spent some time learning amongst them, and I've studied many of their arts during my days of traveling, so we will take care of that. We must not only create a schedule where Naruto has enough time with each of us to master our skills, it must also include a physical workout section where we focus on his strength, speed and flexibility. The masters nodded, agreeing with the man so far. Now, I realize we couldn't fit time in for every style every day. So I've come up with a small plan that we can use as a foundation to formulate the perfect schedule. Akasame turned back to the chalkboard and began to write. We will start every morning with a run around the island and then some strength exercises followed by some stretching. This will serve as his training from 5 until 6:30, where he will break for breakfast. After breakfast he will train with one of the masters until 11:30 when we break for lunch. After lunch he will train with a different master until it is time for dinner at exactly 7. After dinner he will spend at least 1 hour studying the basic curriculum of the academy provided by the Hokage. Any questions? Sakaki was the first to raise his hand. Yeah. Who trains the Gaki when? Akasame smiled and turned back to the chalkboard to begin writing a more detailed schedule. Monday, morning, Jiu-Jitsu, afternoon, Kempo. Tuesday, morning, Karate, afternoon, Muay Thai. Wednesday, morning, Weapons, afternoon, Muay Thai. Thursday, morning, Karate, afternoon, Kempo. Friday, morning, Jiu-Jitsu, afternoon, Shinobi. Saturday, Shinobi, Weapons with Shiga and Akasame. Sunday, Strength, Endurance, Speed, Flexibility. This way the training is in a constant cycle. It will keep his body from setting into a state of normalcy and keep it from adapting to the different parts of the body used for different arts. Sunday will be his day to fully focus on his body, no style work, just pure physical tour training. Naruto felt a cold chill run down his spine. He could see a familiar look in his teacher's eyes that could only mean one thing. Things were going to be interesting. Akasame suddenly dispersed the tense atmosphere by clearing his throat. Now, there is one last thing we must discuss. Tell me, Naruto, what do you know of the beast known as the Kyuubi? XXXXX timeskip XXXXX. Now, remember what I taught you. Kensei said to his disciple as his shadow clone interlocked his fingers behind the blonde's head in a strong grip. Apply the technique properly and your clone will be sent flying. Naruto nodded and placed his right hand against the clone's chin. A moment passed and then his right hand snapped up, grabbing his elbow and both arms pushed together. The force behind this sudden blow was strong enough that the clone was forced to let go and sent careening into the wall behind it. It crashed to the ground moments later and dispelled with a loud pop. Well done, the master said. Now for the next step. The blonde nodded and made a cross-hand sign with the index and middle fingers of each of his hands. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The shout was followed by an explosion of smoke. When it cleared, the room was filled with exact replicas of Naruto Uzumaki. Kensei nodded. Remember, if you mess up one time then you must start all over again. Naruto nodded and turned to face the first of many clones. Kensei watched his disciple as he practiced his newest move, eyes trained to find any flaw in the execution. It was at this moment that Akasame approached his fellow master. Kensei, there is a man named Hakubi in the living room requesting to meet with you. Kensei frowned slightly. Uncle Hakubi? Did he say why he was here? The visiting master shook his head in the negative. No. He simply said it was important he speak with you and asked me to bring you to him. No need, the master said, slipping his hands into his sleeves and turning to walk toward the house. Keep an eye on our young disciple, I'll see what my uncle needs with me. When Kensei stepped through the doorway, his gaze instantly fell on the man sitting at the table, a cup of green tea in his hands. The man was dressed in violet version of the master's robes and a pair of spectacles rested on the bridge of his nose. Also like Kensei, the man sported a bald crown and mustache, but coupled it with a thick beard as well. He had also allowed the hair on the sides of his head to grow freely until it reached just past his shoulders. "It's good to see you again, Kensei," the man greeted his nephew, setting the tea down and standing to embrace the Kenpo master. "How are you?" "I've been well, uncle," Kensei responded while returning the embrace. "Why have you come so far from home?" Hakubi chuckled and the two sat down. "Actually, it was for a few reasons, to be honest. Your wife asked me to check in on you when she heard I was passing this way, so I took a small side trip to see you." Kensei's eyes softened at the mention of the woman. "How is she?" "She's doing surprisingly well, considering how you handed everything off to her and left so quickly. However, there's something you should know." "What?" Hakubi opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by the voice of a young girl. "Uncle Hakubi, there's a weird giant man chasing me." The old pervert's face went as white as a sheet of paper. Please tell me that's not who I think it is," he pleaded, only for his uncle to sigh. "I'm sorry, Kensei," but she would not take no for an answer. The moment the words left his mouth, a pink blur came running through the doorway from the kitchen, followed closely by a laughing Apache. The blur stopped running, revealing itself to be a young girl around the same age as Naruto and dressed in a pink Chinese-style dress. Her dark blue hair was tied back in a ponytail and her bright blue eyes were focused on the Muay Thai master as he stopped in front of her. "Why did little girl run?" Apache asked. "Why are you chasing me?" Apache was just trying to ask why you were here. "I'm sorry if I scared you." "Well, next time just ask." The girl sighed and turned to see her uncle staring at her, and Kensei trying to sneak out a nearby door. "And where do you think you're going, Papa?" Her words froze the man mid-step and he turned to glance fearfully over his shoulder. "Well, Renka, why is my darling daughter so far from home?" The girl continued to glare. "I could ask you the same thing." Suddenly the frightened man sighed and composed himself. "Well, I know you want me to return home, but I can't right now." "Why not?" "I have a disciple here and I cannot leave him at such a crucial part of his training, nor can I bring him with us if I were to leave." Renka pouted and it looked like she was fit to explode, if Hakubi had not stepped in. "Perhaps I can help." Father and daughter turned to face the gently smiling man as he took another sip from his tea. "Kensei, you have had almost no interaction with your daughter in the recent years, including her training in the martial arts. What I suggest is a way to rectify that while still allowing you to spend your days here at Ryazanpaku. Let her stay here for half a year each year and the other half she will spend with her mother. You both get to train her and raise her while still going about life as you've been living for these past few years." Kensei cupped his chin in his hand, thinking about his uncle's words. It was an interesting offer, but he was concerned about her traveling the elemental nations without some sort of guard. Sensing the possible reason for his hesitance, Hakubi decided to sweeten the deal. "I will also have my very own disciples escort her during the trip between here and your home." "Ah, how have those two been lately?" "They are doing quite well, to be honest. I am fully confident in their skills as martial artists and I know they will be more than capable of protecting young Renka here." Kensei sighed but nodded with a small smile. "I assume she already has the necessary supplies." Renka cheered while Hakubi's only response was to pull a single scroll from his sleeve and hand it over to his nephew. "Of course. Well, Renka, since you're going to be staying for a while, how would you like to meet your fellow disciple?" The girl happily nodded and fell in step with her father, but stopped when he turned to address Hakubi once more. "Will you be staying the night?" "Goodness no." The man laughed as he finished off his tea and rose to his feet. "I was merely stopping by to pay a quick visit. I have more work to attend to elsewhere and I must be going." Kensei nodded. "It was good to see you again, hopefully we'll meet again soon." The old man nodded and turned to walk away as the father led his daughter out of the house and toward the dojo. I wonder how Naruto will react when I tell him he has to give his room to Renka. Back in the dojo, a practicing Naruto sneezed, leaving him open for a clone to slam a knee into his gut. The blonde crashed into the wooden walls of the training area, gripping the point of contact and grunting. "What was that?" "Too bad, Naruto." Akasame's voice grabbed the blonde's attention away from both his pain and confusion. "You'll have to start over. Thanks. The end." Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.